Joseph, when he was going to hunt his brothers, and they were out with the flock of the sheep, and his dad sent him and said, go find your brother and check on them, come back and tell me how they're doing. Now, I want to give you a little background here on Joseph. His brothers didn't really care too much for him. They were jealous of him because he was his daddy's pick. He was, I guess in the sense we call it these days, he was daddy's boy. But I want you to understand he was also God's boy. And God had his hands up on him. And I want to read about what his brothers had done to him here. And understand that Joseph's daddy made him a coat of many colors, a coat that was made out of different material. And my wife will probably kill me for saying this, but I posted a picture on Facebook sleeping under my old baby blanket that my great-grandmother made me. And that's what it was, made out of different materials, so to speak. It was a blanket of many colors. But I thought about that blanket when I read about the coat of many colors. And you know, it's just like Beverly saying, we can take broken pieces and take them to God, and He can make something great out of them. He can make something that can keep us warm. He can make something that keeps us feeling safe and cozy. And all that comes through the love of God, through the broken pieces. He can put things together. Now let's get into the reading here. We read that about verse 15. It says, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. Now listen what his brothers were doing here. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, let us not kill him. Now, Reuben was Joseph's oldest brother, and he said, hey, let's don't kill him. He's our brother. Let's don't do that. Let's don't kill our own kin. And it goes on in verse 22, and Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. So Reuben had this plan. If we throw him in this pit, and when they leave, I'm going to go back and get him, and I'm going to save my baby brother, the youngest of them. And he said, I'm going to let him go back to Dad, and everything will be okay. Now, when I read this, I thought, how many times has the old devil wanted to throw me down and put me in a pit? How many times has the old devil wanted to conspire against me through somebody else, and through you through somebody else, and say, well, let's just make mean to them. Let's do something that will harm them. Let's do something that will hurt them. But that person comes to the witch and says, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's just leave it alone. But the old devil don't give up that easy a lot of times. He'll work a different way. So Reuben thought, well, I've got it all planned out. I've got all this worked out for my brother Joseph. We're going to put him in a pit, and they're going to leave, and I'm going to go back and get him. So Reuben, when he was comfortable with that, he wandered off somewhere and taking care of the sheep or whatever it was. Now listen right here what happened in verse 23. And it came to pass, Joseph came to his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty. Now listen, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes, and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites from Gilead, with their camels bearing spiceries and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit if we slay our brother, and conceal his blood? Come and let us see him to the Ishmaelites, and let not your hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our flesh. And his brethren were content. And they passed by Midian, the merchants, and drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned into the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, and he returned unto the brethren, and said, the child is not. and whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat, and killed a kid of goats, and dipped the coat in blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it unto their father, and said, This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or not. Now I'm going to stop there before I get too far into it. I want you to understand what they done here. When they saw their brother coming far off, they plotted against him. I want you to look at it this way. When the devil sees you far off, a lot of times in your life, he plots against you. He wants to entrap you. He wants to burden you down somehow, and he don't always come directly to you. He works through other people to get to you. He works to other people to throw you in that pit of life that's deep, that you can't crawl out when you come to that troubled times in your life and through those problems in your life, or whatever that situation may be. I want you to understand there's always somebody that is praying for you. There's always somebody it's like Reuben was to Joseph. They're always saying, I'm going to take care of them, that you may get them down and you may put them in this pit, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to save them. But the situation was, when Reuben walked off, he came back, they come up with another idea. We're not going to kill our brother. We're not going to slay him. His blood's not going to be upon our hands, but we are going to sell him. We're going to make another way to get rid of him. We're going to make another way that Reuben can't save him, because these brothers knew that Reuben had something up his sleeve. They didn't want Joseph to be in the family because he was a daddy's boy. He was God's chosen child. I want you to understand this morning, if you're sitting here in this church, you're a chosen child of God. You say, Preacher, I'm not saved. I want you to understand that you may not be saved, but you're still chosen by God because He created you. I want you to understand something. If you're not saved, you can come fully to be one of God's children this morning. Joseph was an anointed child of God. I want you to understand that the devil used his brethren against him, his family, so to speak, in our lifestyle. He uses our friends against us. He uses our co-workers against us, and I'm going to get real with it this morning. He even uses our own church members against us at times. And that's how the old devil works in our lives. But I want you to understand, when he gets you down and he gets you out and he throws you into that pit, and all you can see is what's above you, and all you can see is that light shining from outside, I want you to understand this morning that there's somebody that's coming to save you. There's somebody that's going to get you out of that pit. You say, Preacher, how do you know? I want you to understand this morning, when you hit the bottom of the pit, there's nowhere to go but up. You can't go down no further, because the devil has done drawn you down to the bottom of the pit, and all you can see is that light shining above you. I want you to understand that there's a man called Jesus, a man that's going to come to that pit. That man is going to lift you out of that pit that you see no hope. I want you to understand, when you're on the bottom and you hit and you can't get up, that man Jesus will lift you up this morning. That man Jesus will give you the hope and the peace you need in your life this morning. It don't matter who the devil throws at you. It don't matter what situation he uses against you. That man of Jesus will bring you out of that pit this morning if you'll just look up at him. If you'll just look up and don't look down. Because if you look down, there's nothing there but dry dirt. There's no life in dry dirt. You plant a seed in dirt, it takes a little bit of water, Linda, to make that seed grow. You say, Preacher, I'm in a pit. If it fills up with water, I'm going to drown. I want to tell you something. If there's a seed in that pit with you, and there's a little bit of water gets in there, that seed's going to grow, and you're going to ride up on that wonderful tree. That tree is going to grow out of that pit. That branch of Jesus Christ that's going to lift you up. Would you be willing this morning to say, I'm coming out of the pit? It don't matter what the devil's using against you this morning. God can get you through it. It don't matter how deep the pit is. God can get you out of it. You say, Preacher, if the water comes in, I may drown. I'm going to tell you something. The Bible clearly states that Jesus Christ is the fountain of the living water. That water will get you to the top. That hand of Jesus will make a way for you this morning? Would you be willing to crawl out of the pit this morning? Would you be willing to say, God, throw me a rope? God, would you send me down a ladder? A song that Sister Shirley sings in our homecoming. She sings this song. She says, I'm climbing on a ladder and the angels are holding it so I don't slip or I don't fall. Just because you're in a pit and you don't see no hope, I'm telling you, God's holding on to a ladder. He's holding on to hope for you this morning. Would you grab a hold of it and say, God, I'm coming out. God, I'm coming out of the bottom of this pit of my life. I want to be delivered this morning. You say, preacher, is that easy? It's easy enough if you're just willing to humble yourself and say, God, I need you this morning. Jesus, I need to be delivered out of the pit. I need to be delivered out of this hole that the old devil's got me in. But you have to want it yourself. If you want to stay there until the storms come and the rains come in, you want to stay there until somebody comes by and starts throwing a little bit of dirt up on you, you go right ahead. That's your choice. But I'm telling you, there's a way out of the pit this morning. I'm telling you, there's a way out of the troubles in your life this morning. You say, preacher, if I get delivered this morning, am I going to have more trouble? Oh, yeah, you're going to have more troubles. I'm telling you like it is. I'm a preacher, I'm a pastor, I'm a man of God, I live the best I can, but I still have troubles in my life. But I'm glad I know the deliverer this morning. I'm glad I know the man that can get me out of that pit when the devil tries to put me down in it. You say, preacher, you get in. Oh, yeah, I'm in the pit a lot of times in my life, but I know there's hope, and I know all I got to do is say, God, help me this morning. God, lift me out of it this morning. God, lift me out of it tonight before I go to bed. It's that simple. If you're willing just to ask Him this morning. You say, preacher, what all this pit got to do? I want you to understand something this morning. If you're a child of God, I got to get rid of this tie. I want to tell you something this morning. You're a child of God this morning, and I want you to understand that the devil's got you in a pit this morning. I want you to understand it ain't by no coincidence you're there. You say, preacher, did I do wrong? There's a lot of good people out there that don't do wrong in their life, and they have troubled times. There's a lot of good people out there that do everything they can to help their family and their friends, and they're still down in an old dirty pit, still down in an old dried up well. But I want you to understand something. When you get to the bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. And when you go up, I want you to understand it was God's plan that Joseph was put in that pit by his brother. I want you to understand this morning, it might be God's plan that you're in the situation you're in right now. Why is that? Because He can use you. He can strengthen you. He can give you faith. He can give you more joy and happiness. You ever know why? Because if you go on and read, Joseph became a ruler. Joseph became the man that delivered his own family out of famine in that land. They had no food. There was a major drought. And they come to Joseph. They come to the king. And his own brothers didn't know who he was. And he played with them a little bit. He teased them a little bit. But Joseph said, this is my family. They did me wrong. Joseph said, this is my father. He don't know where I'm at. But I'm going to take care of him. Why? Because God sent Joseph forth. God got him out of that pit. He was sold as a slave, but he became a child of God. He was a man of God. He became a ruler. What I'm trying to get at this morning is you understand, just because you're in a pit of life don't mean God can't use you. Just because you're in a pit of life and the devil's trying to hold you down don't mean God don't have a plan for you this morning. Are you willing to get out of that pit this morning and get on the trail, to get on the road to see where God would have you to go this morning? There's a lot of good Christians out there, a lot of people that God can use, but they choose to stay in that pit. Why? Because they want to wallow around in self-pity. Preacher, you ever been? I've been there before. I'm not going to lie. I have. But I'm glad I know that man Jesus that can get me up and get me back going again. I'm glad I know that man Jesus that saved my soul, that took an old sinner that I was, an old alcoholic, and got me out of the pit of this old world and put me on the road to glory, the road to heaven to serve Him. Do I stumble? Yes. Do I fall? Yes. Do I do things I shouldn't have done? Yes, I do. Do I do well? No, I don't. It just happens. Why? Because the old devil puts up a stumbling block. But I want you to understand something this morning. If you're willing to let God deliver you out of that pit this morning, if you're willing to say, I'm going up, I ain't looking down. Because if you want to dig, you can dig that pit a little bit deeper, I believe. But I believe if you look up this morning and say, God, get me out of this. God, would you deliver me? God, would
would you just throw me a rope so I can start climbing? I want you to understand that hand of God is holding that rope, and He ain't going to let go of it. I want you to understand this morning, that rope that He's throwing you this morning, it ain't going to slip none in His hand. He ain't going to let you slip back. If you slip back, it's your own fault because you let go. Preacher, you're being mean. I'm just telling you the truth. We got to have the willpower, the want, and the faith in Jesus Christ to get us out of that pit alive. God has a plan for you this morning. You say, I'm useless. No, you're not. You're sitting in the house of God. Why? Because you had a desire to be here this morning. For whatever reason it is, God's telling you to come out of that pit this morning. Would you be willing to do that this morning for God? Would you be willing to say, Lord, I want to be delivered. Lord, throw me a rope. Would you be willing to do that this morning? I want to read just a few verses out of Psalms 30, verses 1 and 5. 1 through 5. It says, I will exalt thee, O Lord, for thou hast lifted me up, and hast not made my foes to rejoice over me. You understand the devil ain't going to get the last life. I want you to understand, if you're God's child, the devil may be laughing now, but when it's said and done, he's going to have a big old black eye. He's going to have mud thrown in his face. Why? Because you ain't giving up on God. Why? Because you're willing to come out of that pit this morning. It says, O Lord, my God, I cried to thee, and thou hast healed me. O Lord, thou hast brought up my soul from the grave. Thou hast kept me alive, that I should not go down into the pit. That tells me, Lord, when you come out of that pit, you ain't going to go back in that pit. That tells me when God delivers you from it, you're delivered from it. That tells me when God answers the prayer, that prayer stays answered. Why is that? Because that's the God we serve. That's the God that ain't going to let you go back to where you were as long as you trust in Him and follow Him. Now you say, I'm going back. I want to live that lifestyle. I want to live that lifestyle. You want to get back in that pit, I want you to understand something. You got to dig that pit yourself. Because when you come out of it, I believe God fills that pit up so you don't slip back up and fall in it. You want to dig it? Dig it. But I ain't lending you a shovel. I'm telling you how to stay out of it this morning. I'm telling you how to stay out of that pit and to be delivered from that pit. You may fall in another hole, but God will get you out of that one also. That gets filled up behind you. You may slip again. God will take care of that. He'll fill it up and move on. All you got to do is cry out to Him and trust in Him this morning. Now listen right here in verse 4. Sing unto the Lord, O ye saints of His, and give thanks at the remembrance of His holiness. For His anger endures but a moment, and His favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. You want you to understand. You may be in a pit and you say, Preacher, I ain't got no light. I'm telling you, if you just listen this morning, I'm telling you, if you just ask for that rope, there'll be light in the morning. There'll be joy in the morning for you. Would you get a hold of it this morning? Would you cry out and say, Jesus, I need that rope. Jesus, I need to be delivered. You say, Preacher, I'm lost. I'm unsaved. And I'm down in a pit. I want to tell you something. If you call upon Him, He'll get you out of the pit and He'll save your soul this morning. He'll give you light and hope and joy if you'll just come to Him this morning. Listen to this. Psalms 42. He brought me up also out of a horrible pit, out of the very clay, and set my feet upon a rock, and established my going. He'll take you out of there, and He'll put your feet on a solid rock this morning. Would you give it to Him this morning? Are you willing to come out of that pit, or do you just want to hang out a little longer? I want you to understand something. You all have heard this scripture before. The Bible says your life is but a vapor. It's here a while and then it vanishes away. I'm going to tell you this morning, this old boy ain't going to die in no pit. This old boy is going to die in the arms of God. I'm going to die in the presence of God. I ain't going to die in no pit alone. I'm not going to die down in the bottom. Why? Because God made a way for me. God saved my soul to set my feet on a solid rock. God said, it's yours, you can have it, and by golly, I'm going to take everything He gives me. Why? Because it's going to keep me out of that pit. It's going to keep me out of troubled times of life. Would you be willing to get a hold of it this morning? Would you be willing just to grab a hold of the rope and come out of that pit? You say, Preacher, I can't climb a rope. Well, God will throw you a ladder. You say, Preacher, I'm scared of a ladder. Well, God will come down and get you Himself if that's what you want this morning. It's up to you to be delivered. It's up to you this morning to be saved. Only you can ask God in your heart. If I could go through and everybody was lost here this morning and say, I want to save you, I would, but I can't. Why? Because this old boy didn't go to the rugged cross. Jesus Christ did. This old boy didn't come down from heaven and become God in the flesh. Jesus Christ did. This old boy can't throw throw you a rope and get you out of a spiritual pit. This old boy can't throw you a rope and get you delivered out of everything in your life. Why? Because money's limited. Why? Because strength is limited. Why is that? Because prior sometimes we limited ourselves, but I want you to understand that man named Jesus, that man that's standing above that pit this morning, can throw you a rope. He can throw you a ladder. He can walk right down there and pick you up if you're just willing to ask him this morning. You say, preacher, what if I die in this pit lost? I'm going to tell you, you ain't going up. You're going to go on down. You say, preacher, you said I done hit bottom. I'm going to tell you, you hit bottom in your life. But if you leave this world on the bottom, you're going to go even deeper. And that's to a place called hell this morning. You say, preacher, that's me. I'm just telling you what the Bible says. I'm just telling you, you got a choice this morning. You can choose heaven or you can choose hell. You can choose to stay in the pit or you can choose to hold your hands up and cry to God this morning and be delivered out of that pit this morning. I'm going to tell you something. You say, preacher, if I come out of the pit, is God going to use you? Yes, he'll use you, but you have to be willing to let him use you. You say, preacher, God got a plan for me? Yes, he's got a plan for you. How do you know that, preacher? Because you're sitting here right this morning. He gives you the first clue that he has a plan for you this morning. You're sitting in the house of God. He's been spoke to your heart this morning. I don't know what's on your heart, but God does. I don't have to know, because that's between you and God. You say, preacher, that's me? No. Because if I stick my nose in it, it may not help you a bit. But if I tell you what God can do for you this morning, it will help you to deliver you from everything that you ever need. Would you be willing to do that this morning? Would you be willing to say, Jesus, I'm ready to come out of the pit. Jesus, the devil's tricked me up, threw me down in here so many times. I want you to understand something. You may feel like the old devil's rolling a stone over that hole this morning, but I'm going to tell you a man that defeated the stone is over a grave, and that man was Jesus Christ. That man can deliver you out of anything if you're just willing to call upon him this morning. Would you do that? I want to close with this scripture. Sister Beverly gets us a song to give for an invitation. Psalms 55:22. It says, cast thy burdens upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to be moved. Would you be willing to come out of the pit this morning? Would you be willing to say, I want to be delivered this morning? Would you be willing to say, I've hung out down here long enough? I want you to understand something. If you're at the bottom, there's no way to go but up. I want you to understand God has a plan for you this morning. God has a way in your life to set you free. God has a way in your life to put you down that road that you can go home to be with him. God has that way in life when trouble times come, and speed bumps come, roadblocks come, potholes come, and you may trip, fall, another pit. He's made that way to get you out of it and fill that one up and take care of it. And that's through by Jesus Christ this morning. Would you give it to him as we all stand just a moment?